situation. So Stephen, it's lovely to have you with us, and we look forward very much to what you have to say to us.
Is this microphone working? Yes, I think it is. Brothers and sisters, it's a great joy to be with you today. Steve, thank you for that welcome. And it has indeed been a joy and inspiration for me over many years to work with Steve on a great number of projects. And here we are today to think about the work of evangelism and particularly the work of nurture. How might we help those who are wanting to find out more about the Christian faith to be incorporated into the body of Christ? That's what we're thinking about today. But let me start with a story. I bring you greetings from the great county of Essex. The only way is Essex, as I'm sure you know, even in Yorkshire. But I was born and brought up in Essex, but I've only been back in Essex for less than a year. And for most of the last 6 or 7 years, I was Bishop of Reading. Now, if you're the Bishop of Reading, what that really means is Bishop of Berkshire. And let me tell you, South Yorkshire, Berkshire is a seriously upmarket, posh and pucker kind of a place. Sorry, did I say Berkshire? What I meant, of course, was the Royal County of Berkshire. Yeah, not just any old county, a royal county, no less. And as the Reading itself, of course, is a bit of an embarrassment for Berkshire. It's kind of God's last laugh on the royal county that somewhere that really should belong somewhere in the Midlands has slipped into the Royal County of Berkshire. But part of my responsibilities as the Bishop of the Royal County of Berkshire was that, you get to meet the great and the good of the county. And it's over a year ago now, but the beginning of last year, I was invited to dinner at the house of the Lord Lieutenant of the Royal County of Berkshire and various other high sheriffs and lords and ladies and members of Parliament were at this great dinner. And when the dinner finished and you're being ushered to the front door and you're putting on your coats, just at the huddle near the door itself, I heard the cry go up, "Oh, the bishop will know." Now, I have to tell you that whenever I hear the words, "Oh, the bishop will know," my heart sinks. And before I could skulk into the shadows, I found myself being pushed to the front of this huddle where 2 worthy gentlemen from the Royal County of Berkshire were staring up at the lintel of the Lord Lieutenant's door, on which was written a Latin text. Now, one has to admire the confidence that the good people of Berkshire have in the learning and education of the bishops of the Church of England. But I think I can safely say this in Yorkshire. I was thinking to myself, oh no, not for the first time, the bishop is about to be revealed as a bit of an oik from Essex. I'm going to go a bit off message here, but I think we've got time. There's a clock up there. I'll keep an eye on it. It's very, very funny because I've not been able to tell these stories because I was in Berkshire for so long. But the other thing I used to do, which was a real gas, was I'd have to go and take confirmations at these very, very upmarket public schools. I mean, in Berkshire, it's kind of wall-to-wall public schools. You may have heard of a few of them. Eton, Radley, Wellington, not just any old public school, but top of the Premier League public schools. And I would go and take these confirmation services at these great schools, and usually there'd be some do after the confirmation, and quite often I'd find myself chatting with, let us say, the headmaster of Eton, and over conversation he would say to me, "So Bishop, tell me, where did you go to school?" Now, let me tell you, I'm not ashamed of where I went to school. So I tell him, proudly and confidently, oh, I went to Belfrys. Now, when I say Belfrys, the headmaster of Eton rather assumes that this must be some minor public school that he ought to have heard of, but he hasn't, but he doesn't want to embarrass the bishop by admitting that he hasn't heard of it. So he, kind of stroke his chin and say, oh, yes, Belfrys, and then change the subject. Now and again, somebody would soldier on and say, now tell me, Bishop, remind me, where exactly is Belfrys? To which I would then respond, I say, well, I hardly think you need reminding. I'd be surprised if you'd ever heard of it, because Belfrys is a secondary modern school in Southend. And let me tell you, at the secondary modern school in Southend that I went to, we didn't do Latin. Now, the thing is, you can't actually get to be ordained, let alone a bishop in the Church of England, without picking up a bit of Latin on the way. But there I was, staring up at this text, and basically I had no idea what it meant at all. I had some vague idea that maybe that word meant something, but really I didn't know. Till I noticed that at the end of the text, in brackets, in English, in very small print, it said this: Psalm 127, verse 1. And I thought, oh, thank you, God. Because I may not know very much Latin, but I do know the Bible. And I do know the Psalms. In fact, for many of us, but particularly for us clergy, the Psalms are the bedrock and the foundation of our praying. And for as long as I can remember, I've pretty much been reading the Psalms day after day after day after week after year after year. And no, I couldn't recite all of them off by heart like some very holy ancient Benedictines might have been able to, but I think I do know this one. I've often reflected, by the way, on why we love the Psalms. I think we love the Psalms because they're so ancient. And we think to ourselves, they're so ancient, they're so venerable, they are the great prayer book of Scripture, they've been recited by the people of God for thousands of years. Maybe that's why we love them, but I don't believe that. I think the reason we love the Psalms is not because they're so old, but because they're so young. The Psalms are the songbook of the people of God in its youth. That's why they're so full of joy, so full of energy, so full of passion, so full of anger, so full of frustration. That's why they talk so directly to the human heart. Anyway, that's the subject for another session. But yes, I do know this one. And in case you're not sure, Psalm 127 and verse 1, unless the Lord builds the house, in vain do the builders labor. And so I was able to give a perfect translation. And everyone was happy. We knew the bishop would know. I did actually give a full confession after the perfect translation. But brothers and sisters, I want to put that bit of Scripture right at the start, at the centre of our day. Because like any building, and we're going to muddle our metaphors as we go this morning, We're talking about growth, but there's plenty of places in the Bible where they use the metaphor of building to describe what we're about. Unless you get the foundations right, everything else will go wrong. So what is the foundation of the work of evangelism and nurture to which God is calling us? It is this: God is the evangelist. God is the one who brings people to faith. God is the one who nurtures people in faith. He is the one who builds his house. And the great, radical, astonishing good news of the Christian faith is simply this: that God does indeed want to build his house in our house. He wants to make his home in our heart. He longs for nothing more than to tabernacle with us, to build his house here. And our job as the people of God, and personally, I find this an almighty relief. You know, it's not my job to convert anybody. You know, I've often found myself saying, for years, when I was based over in Huddersfield, but working nationally for the Archbishop's evangelism team, I laboured under the title of an evangelist. Well, let me tell you, so the record is straight, I worked as an evangelist full-time for about 10 years, but I was a total flop. In those 10 years, I never converted anybody, not a single person. But, and here's another metaphor to keep in your muddle, if you get my meaning, I did have the privilege of being the midwife at quite a number of safe deliveries. Do you see? And it's really important to get this right from the start. God is the one who brings people to faith. Our job, therefore, is to work with the evangelizing God, to be the good companions, the faithful witness, the faithful sower, the faithful builder, the faithful gardener, whichever image works for you. That's our job, to try to, as best we can, create the conditions where God can do God's stuff and make his home with us. So let me turn to some wise words from a great son of the Sheffield Diocese, who over the years has had a huge influence upon my thinking and praxis in the Christian life. It's not on. There we are. And this is a quotation from a book by Robert Warren, which he wrote, probably 15 years ago now, but it's still a wonderful book called Being Human, Being Church. And this is what Robert wrote. God's way of being human has been revealed in Jesus Christ, is available to everyone through the outpouring and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and is currently being demonstrated down at your local church. Now, I think what I want to say to you is that I passionately believe the first two parts of that statement. I don't much like the soundbite culture that we live in, but if you absolutely pushed me into a corner and said, well, come on then, what is the soundbite for the Christian message for our culture today? I think I would say something like this. In Christ, you can become yourself. In Christ, you can become the person you are meant to be, the person in your deepest desires you long to be, that God indeed does have a picture in his heart of the person you are capable of becoming, and that God's way of being human is available in Jesus Christ, demonstrated in Christ, and that is something that you can receive. In Christ, you can become yourself. And I think that's a good I know we're not speaking directly about the sowing and the evangelizing this morning, but let's go through that door to get to the nurture. I think in our proclamation of the gospel, this is a way that resonates with the longings of our culture. And it's a radical message, because actually we live in a culture which is telling people pretty much the precise opposite. I mean, you can't switch on your computer, even switch on your phone nowadays, drive 100 yards down the road, open a magazine, without being bombarded with images of the sort of person you are meant to be. And it's a particular pressure on the young, though the rest of us are hardly immune. And the world is keeping on telling us that, if you get that brand of perfume and that designer label, and if you drove that car or went on that foreign holiday, or indeed, let's be honest, brothers and sisters, as I look around the room today, I cannot help but notice that some of us here have committed the grave and terrible sin of growing old, of losing our hair, of putting on weight. But there is good news. This can be changed. With the right amount of plastic surgery, high fiber diet, body part replacements, you can find joy and fulfillment and peace. And that's what's going on in our culture. The culture is telling us that you can somehow consume and purchase your way to fulfillment. And none of it works. Or maybe to be more accurate, it works just enough to get you hooked. And as I look around what's happening in our country, there is a disturbing underclass who are losing out on this altogether. But the vast majority of us, we've become a nation of junkies. Hooked on the idea that consuming and purchasing will give us the things that we long for. And the Christian message cuts through all that and says, no, it is in Christ that, you can become the person you want to be, let alone the person that God wants you to be. And the Bible says that from the very first moment of our being, when we were just a couple of cells dividing into life in the flood tide of our mother's womb, we were known and loved by God, and that God has a purpose for our lives. And unless the Lord builds the house, in vain do the builders labor. God wants to make his home with you. And it's when we find that communion with God that we find the joy, the peace, the fulfillment that the human heart longs for. Our hearts are restless until they find their rest in God. So yes, I absolutely believe this. God's way of being human has been revealed in Jesus Christ and is available to everyone through the outpouring and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. No, it's the third bit of the sentence that I have the difficulty with. And this is where we need a sober and honest assessment of the priorities and the activities and the ministries of the local church. Is our local church focused on that set of ministries and activities which would make it clear that this new way of being human, which is such good news for our culture, is not only being demonstrated by the lives of the Christian community, but is something where there is open access to all. And if you want to find out about this new way of being human, then you are welcome to come and participate in the life of the church with us and find it for yourself. In other words, there is in every church a place of nurture. And by a place of nurture, what I mean is a place where you can find out what it is to be human as it has been revealed in Jesus Christ, and it can become true for you. Because against all the seductive but ultimately empty false philosophies of the world, we Christians say this: I worship, therefore I am. It is in my relationship with God, which has been made possible to me by Jesus Christ, which is available through the Holy Spirit. It is that and that alone which makes me fully and truly and beautifully human. And just to emphasize the problem beautifully, here's a quote from another esteemed theologian, Davina McCall. Is it working? Has it come up? We've gone on to Bob Jackson. Where are we? Bob, your moment's coming later. Oh, no, you're not, Bob. You're Bob Hopkins. I've got a quote from Bob Jackson later. But this is a fantastic quote. I wanted to be famous to prove I was worth something. But the day I got my own show on MTV, I cried all night because it didn't bloody validate me. And I'd spent years thinking it would. Fulfillment is an inside job. Well, there is the culture crying out that the things that we thought would fulfill and satisfy ultimately disappoint, and the human heart is longing for something else. So here's, to my mind, 4 things that will make a difference, and you won't be surprised to hear I'm going to spend the bulk of the rest of this session thinking about the 4th one, a place of nurture. But here are 4 things that I think would make a real difference if they could become embedded in the life of the local church. First of all, teaching people to pray. I look back to my own parish ministry with some slight shame and embarrassment, because I think I took the view that people knew how to pray and were praying. And now I think I was probably wrong. And one of the first things that I would do if I was a parish priest again is I would try to make the local church a school of prayer. Because more than anything else, I think it is this that will not only make the difference, but will be the foundation upon which nothing much else will ever happen. Again, there isn't time this morning to talk about that, so I'm just going to pretty much leave that there. But I would want to emphasize the point that you can't give what you haven't got. And therefore, unless we are letting the gospel evangelize the church as it is at the moment, so that we can live our lives in relationship with God, then nothing much else will happen. The second thing I would, whether you use this phrase or not, doesn't matter. The second thing I would love to see happen is Christian people developing a rule of life, which isn't just about their life of prayer, but about the whole of their life. When was the last time any of us actually fasted? Most of us, when it comes to Lent, we just give up biscuits for a few weeks. When was the last time we actually fasted and prayed? When was the last time we considered our carbon footprint to be a spiritual discipline? When did we last think about how we inhabit this planet and this life in a way which is distinctively Christian and gives real honor to God in such a wasteful and profligate world? One thing which I would also like each local church to do is to agree the bottom line. Steve and I were talking about this over breakfast. Let me explain what I mean. Say in one of your churches, at your next PCC meeting, that the vicar comes along and puts forward a resolution that all worship in your church is going to be cancelled with immediate effect. So all Sunday services cancelled, any weekday services cancelled. That's it. That's so second millennium worship. We're done with that. You just stop it all. So say that happened, and it was passed. Fantastic. Never have to go to church again. That's my way of being a Christian. Everybody votes for it. It's carried unanimously, but something's nagging away inside your head. You've got this feeling that this can't be right, and so you decide to abstain on the vote. Say that happened, and the following day you phoned up the bishop and said, Bishop Stephen, at our PCC last night, we voted to stop all worship. Say that happened. If the bishop kind of got on the phone the next minute to the vicar and then came down to the parish to sort them out, I don't think the rest of us would be thinking, oh, this bishop is a bit of a dictator, a bit of an autocrat, rather heavy-handed. We'd all be saying, yeah, of course. That's the deal, isn't it? The people of God, we are a worshipping community. Our prayer and our worship, that's what defines us. And without that, well, there's nothing else. We'd all get it. My question for the Church of England is this. What else is so fundamental that we really ought to be held accountable for it? Now, this is an uncomfortable question, and I'll tell you why it's uncomfortable, because we all know the answer. It might be hard to agree a definitive list of this is what every Christian, doesn't matter what the context is, doesn't matter whether you're rural or urban or high or low, it's more fundamental even than those things, which are so precious and important. It'd be hard for us to agree an absolutely definitive list, but the thing is, we do know. I don't even mean head knowledge, kind of visceral, deep in your gut stuff. We do know that there are some things that Jesus requires of us, but we don't hold ourselves accountable. Jesus said, go into all the world and make disciples. And he's asked us, required of us, entrusted to us a ministry of sharing and communicating the Christian faith, what in this diocese we're calling that ministry of sowing, and then nurturing people in the Christian faith, that's what we're thinking about today, and then growing people to a maturity of faith and a disciple. That is not an optional set of ministries for certain churches who feel like that. It is something that is asked of every Christian community, and I believe it will be grown up and healthy in the Church of England if we recognise that and said, actually, if a church is simply doing nothing to develop these ministries, it ought to be okay. I don't mean in a heavy, disciplinary way, but it ought to be okay for a bishop or an archdeacon or somebody to sit down with that parish and say, brothers and sisters, what's going on here? Because to be the Church of Jesus Christ, we need to be not just a worshipping community, but also an evangelizing and a discipling community. And if you think I'm wrong, then show me in the scriptures and the tradition where I'm wrong. But I don't think anybody's going to. I think we know that that's what we ought to be, but we're struggling to find the appropriate ways of doing it in our world and also with our history. Because again, let's be honest about ourselves. In the Church of England, there has been a strange mixture of complacency and triumphalism. It's a fatal mix, by the way. The complacency has been that we think people will naturally gravitate towards us. And the triumphalism has been that we believe ourselves to be the superior brand in the Christian marketplace. And the thing is, it kind of works a bit. If you do nothing about evangelism and discipleship, chances are a few people over the years will join your church. I've started to wonder whether it might be better if nobody joined, because then it would wake us up to the fact that actually we need to be intentional about these ministries and a lot more humble about these ministries. That we need to be doing what we see Jesus doing in the scriptures. Those of you who are coming to my workshop will be doing a lot more work on some of the biblical principles that lie behind nurture, but a story that's had a huge influence upon me and upon Stephen in our work in evangelism and nurture has obviously been the Emmaus Road story. And that gives us a beautiful and refreshing Anglican way of approaching these ministries, because in that story Jesus meets people where they are. He walks with them while they're going in the wrong direction. He listens to them before he speaks. He challenges them, but he challenges them in order to help them make sense of their questions and their experience. He waits to be invited in. And these are ways of doing this work that fit in with the pastoral way of being church, which is still rightly at the heart of much of Anglicanism. And we need to make it our own by building a place of nurture in every church. There is huge evidence to suggest that when we do that, the church will grow. I think I need to say that again because I'm not sure that you believe it. There is huge evidence to show that if you do this, the church will grow. And yet, even though there's this huge evidence, I think the latest statistics show that something like 60% of churches in the Church of England don't really have a place of nurture. They don't have something regularly built into the year-by-year life of their church where those who are not yet Christians but who'd like to find out more can come and explore what it means to be human, what the Christian faith teaches, and at a very basic level, just what the church is like. So that by feeling a sense of belonging to the Christian community, having a place where they can ask their questions, the Christian faith starts to grow and develop. We've now caught up with Bob Jackson. This is what Bob Jackson says in one of his books. The job for the Church of England in the next few years is something it is not normally good at. To take what began as a fringe idea, recognise its God-given potency for sharing faith and the growth of the church, and make it thoroughly and respectably mainstream in the life of every parish. I mean, I think the fantastically bold vision that is set before you in this diocese is simply this, that, well, certainly every benefice should have a place of nurture, should have somewhere where people who are not yet Christians can encounter and find out about the Christian faith. Do you remember that? Was it called The Field of Dreams? Did you see that film? Do you remember the film I'm talking about? The one where the guy gets this vision of building a baseball pitch in a field where he lives. And I think that the line in the film was, if you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. Now, I know that some of you don't believe me, because otherwise I think you would have done it. But all I can tell you is, having worked with churches up and down the country, in every bit of the country, my experience, almost without exception, is that when churches have given themselves to the ministry of building a place of nurture, it has transformed their life. Let me tell you how it might do that. Many of you, forgive me if I talk chiefly to the clergy, but I know many lay people are involved in this ministry as well. Think of bereavement ministry. Most clergy will have had this experience many, many times. You visit a bereaved family. In my experience, it was usually the post-funeral visit that was the one where actually a lot of stuff came out. You're sitting with the family, you're sitting with the bereaved widow, let us say, and she's asking you questions about what life is all about, where life is going, if there is a God, what has happened to the person who died. And as you're sitting talking with them, you're thinking to yourself, if I could visit this person every week for the next 3 months, I think this person would come to faith. Because you know that the questions that they are asking, that is where those questions lead. And that person is actually very, very open to hear and receive the good news of God in Jesus Christ. But you can't visit them every week for the next 3 months. In fact, just getting one visit in after the funeral feels like quite an achievement. And now your guilt bells are ringing because you'd meant to set up a lay visiting bereavement team, but you'd never really got round to that, or actually it was quite a small church and everyone was overworked anyway, so it wasn't an option. And so what do you actually do? Well, perhaps when you go to evening prayer that day, you pray for that person, you as it were, lay them on the altar, you offer it up to God, and you hope for the best. But actually, in ordinary day-to-day pastoral ministry, there are so many times where we meet people who are open to wanting to find out more, but what we often don't have in place is any sort of next step. The only next step on offer is usually the individual ministry of the vicar or a lay person. And that, of course, is therefore incredibly limited in what you can do or achieve. I'm not saying a place of nurture solves everything, but it makes a transformative difference. Because now, year by year, in the life of your church, is a place to which people can be invited. Invited with the simple question, would you like to find out more? And I would point out that that question is not so dissimilar from the question that Jesus asks on the Emmaus Road in verse 17 of that story. What are you discussing as you walk along? An open question that simply begins a conversation. And a nurture group creates a space where a conversation can happen, which for many people will and does lead to faith. The job for the Church of England in the next few years is to do something it is not normally good at. It's to take something which many churches have done, and there is huge bodies of evidence to show how this has been effective, and then make it very ordinary, what I'm calling the bottom line. Dare we say to ourselves as a church that we could reach a point in the next few years where running some sort of nurture course every year is as normal as a harvest supper, a Christmas bazaar, a Christingle. That's just something we do. And I think what we would find is that year on year, I don't think it would be huge numbers to begin with, because I don't think we're ready for that yet. I expect it will be 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s. Small groups of people getting together to explore the Christian faith and then become part of God's church. But that's something we can build on. The scandal is that there are now something like nationwide 60% of our churches which are really not doing anything at all, simply waiting for people to come to us and then responding as best we can, rather than putting something in place and then letting that be somewhere that you invite people to through all the ministries that go on day by day. After all, it is something the Church of England is still really good at. We're still really, really good at being in contact with people day by day and week by week. So this is what I think a place of nurture can achieve. It provides a place where people can explore and discover the Christian faith. And there are various really good resources available to help you do that. Probably the brand leader and the most famous one is obviously the Alpha course, but there's many other good resources as well. The Emmaus program, the Start material, which you can look at over there, Christianity Explored, and other homegrown resources. Frankly, it doesn't really matter what resources you use. You need to find the ones that are going to work for you best. But I think one of the workshops today is looking at the different published materials that are available. So that's the first thing it does. It enables people to explore and discover the Christian faith. It gives people an experience of Christian community. Now, it's really important not to underestimate the value of this. We all know, probably from our own experience, that to feel that you belong, to feel that you are valued, often this precedes believing and faith. And therefore, being part of a community is vital to this process. And then, of course, helping people to take their next steps on the Christian journey. Underpinning everything that we are saying about evangelism and nurture in this day is that other basic truth that for most people today, becoming a Christian is like a journey. Yes, of course, there are some people who will have sudden and dramatic conversion experiences, but still, they remain the minority. Having said that, even if you do have a sudden and dramatic experience, you still need to be nurtured into that faith. So the nurture group is still just as vital, just a slightly different starting point. But most people, it's not like that. Most people today simply, they're Davina McCalls. I thought something else would give me joy and fulfillment. It hasn't actually worked. And suddenly they find themselves open to exploring the possibilities of God, the claims of the Christian faith. And again, in our day-to-day lives and ministries, we're bumping into people like this all the time. In my experience, nearly every funeral you do, but also weddings and baptisms and with church schools and with, the brownies who meet in the hall, not to mention our colleagues at work, we're bumping into people who are asking these questions. Some of them will be open to coming along to a group to explore the Christian faith, to experience Christian community, and then to take the next steps. I know some of these practical things will be explored in the workshop, but let me just go through the how. I think the biggest fear that people have about starting like this is they worry who will come. And I understand that fear. That's why we tend to be reactive. We tend to wait until somebody says they want to find out about the Christian faith, and then we cobble together a confirmation group or something. I think we have to become much more proactive about this. And my advice, and I'd give this advice to every parish community here, my advice is if at the end of today you say to yourselves, we've got to build a place of nurture in our church. That's got to become an ordinary, everyday thing we do, just like our Christingle and our harvest supper. What I would say to you is, get the dates in the diary. Put them in the diary now. Even when you don't know who on earth is going to come, even when there's nobody coming, get the dates in the diary. And then, what's the worst thing that could happen? What's the very worst thing that could happen? So you put the dates in the diary for next year. Nobody comes. Hey, it's win-win. You've got 15 free evenings, But the experience of other churches is that you'll be really, really surprised. Because it starts changing very, very subtly all the rest of your ministry. You're only going to find this out by doing it. But it does subtly change the focus of all the rest of your ministry. Suddenly you find yourself saying, actually, we've got this thing happening, next month. Why don't you come along? How does it work? Well, for the most part, it's a course with a syllabus, with a leader. That's what it looks like. But actually, the most important thing is making a context where people can ask their questions. That's what really matters. And sometimes in my more unworthy moments, I think to myself, not only does it not matter what material you use, frankly, you could not have any material. You could just read out the phone book. Actually, what really matters is there are people there, you've welcomed them, they feel valued, and you take their questions seriously. That's what really matters. Actually, again, experiences that a good course just relaxes everybody, gets you into it, but it's not the course that's important. It's the fact that they're there and they're taken seriously. So it doesn't matter what materials you use, I've said that. Who will lead it? And this, I think, is another reason sometimes we shy away from doing this, is we think, we haven't got anybody to lead it. Again, my experience is, to begin with, this is something that it's appropriate for clergy to lead, and to say, I'm going to take responsibility to lead from the front on this. But if you clergy do lead it to begin with, if you ensure that from day one there are one or two apprentices at your side, who will learn from you on the job, actually in a fairly short space of time, it's no longer dependent on clergy leadership. Though I have to say, it's one of the things I miss the most now I'm a bishop. It's the first time in my ministry I've not been involved hands-on in some nurture group activity. I miss it hugely. So I think it is appropriate for clergy to be involved in the leadership, though not solely. How often should we do it? Well, I think to begin with, annually. I think that's a good, reasonable objective, to say every church tries to do it annually. So I think I need to shut up in a minute. So a couple of little last things. This is another great quote, this time from Julie Birchall. And this is Julie Birchall really giving her testimony as she has started taking the Christian faith seriously. And she said this: first of all, let me tell you what this isn't. This is what her testimony isn't. It's not some I was lost and now I'm found sob story. These days, many people reach out to faith to find peace. I had too much peace in my life already. In faith, I was looking to be troubled. I really, really like that quote. And I just kind of put it on the table to make it absolutely clear, again, that this is God's work and that God has a very, very big vision for his world. And if you go down this road, prepare to be surprised and disturbed. So I've slightly adapted Robert Warren. God's way of being human has been revealed in Jesus Christ. Is available to all through the outpouring and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. Is currently being demonstrated down at your local church. And you can find out for yourself by coming along to our. And that is the challenge facing each of you. How will you complete that sentence for your church? Are you prepared to be held accountable for the completion of that sentence? Would it be fair and reasonable, at the next archdeacon's visitation, for instance, for the archdeacon to ask you? So, have you built a place of nurture in your church? Is there somewhere within the ministry of your church for people who are not yet Christians to find out more? Thank you.